And hello and welcome to AleksConnects Creative Sandbox, making WWE Superstars art. My name is Alex, and today we will continue to sculpt CM Punk. Reasons for that I will explain later, and continue to talk about basically the WWE. The continuation of the week after Hell in a Cell. So we will start with I kind of decided that if I want to switch streams into the more creative part and less WWE, because again at the beginning of the streams I kind of started with just talking about WWE and that's it, and we didn't necessarily sculpt it that much. The reason for that because I just want to establish to basically show potential viewers like what I know about WWE, or like what my interests are. Again, I already talked about it probably yesterday, but still, again, I want to kind of establish the main theme of the streams throughout like the first couple of episodes. And today is the episode or the session number 6. Which means basically we will kind of still probably up till session 10, maybe less, maybe till session 8, we will sculpt in a pretty slow pace. I will still try to figure out how I'm going to approach these streams in terms of the format. Again, since there's no audience, it's a good way for me to basically practice, figure out how it's going to work, what I like the most, what format is basically the more appropriate personally for me. So right now I'm kind of heading towards probably starting with WWE, talking about WWE for about half an hour maybe, and then the other 1.5 hours actually go into the creative, because again, like previously in the previous session we kind of run off topics pretty quickly, and this is considering the fact that we talked about Hell in a Cell. So ideally, I believe one of the things that I will try to do, especially in this stream, I have about 2 hours, closer to the 2 hours recording done of the process for now. When I tried to basically went through from the previous sculpt of the CM Punk, from the previous version that we finished on the last stream, up to making CM Punk a little bit more look like CM Punk. It's still pretty far from that. Again, I'm going to show you this throughout the session, but still, again, the format that I want to try today is basically I want to try to almost do the same as I did in the previous stream. Basically, we'll start with talking about WWE. We'll cover everything that we didn't cover yesterday, and that's kind of it. So let's just try check this out and go. Covered yesterday. Good, sound works. So yeah, so the first thing that I will do is, of course, we're going to cover like the WWE. So since 205 Live, since now 205 Live, NXT and Cruiserweight and Mae Classic are going to be on Wednesdays. We're going to talk about Cruiserweight division and Cruiserweight things on basically the second day of our streams throughout the week, which is today. So we will start with Cruiserweight division. We will go over it pretty quickly, and I believe it's going to be much faster if I'm going to use this talk about Cruiserweight division that way. So if we actually going to talk about the Cruiserweight division that way, it's going to be much faster. There's going to be some visuals for you to basically see what I'm talking about, not just me talking with no superstars on here. So again, especially if you're not familiar with whom I'm talking about, specifically if you're not that big of a fan of WWE and not necessarily watching certain show. So again, and waiting just for creative stuff to come. So yeah, so there's not that much to cover in WWE from this part of the week. I mean, we talked about Raw, we talked about SmackDown previously, we talked about Hell in a Cell in the previous session. Today we just go into quickly cover a couple of matches that transpired on 205 Live, and then we will go back into the NXT. Then after NXT we're going to talk about Mae Classic, and that's kind of it. Maybe if I will feel like it, I will talk about Total Divas first episode. I don't know. I truly don't know if I should talk about it, because when it comes down to the Total Divas, I've kind of look at it as a completely different kind of content, not necessarily a WWE related content. Although I'm watching Total Divas and Total Bellas, and I'm watching them for the reason, like, looking basically at psychology of the wrestlers and outside of the WWE. So basically trying to like look at them as a real human beings, not just as a superstars with the gimmicks or whatever. So, and for me, it kind of actually gives a lot of context of the struggles that WWE superstars are going through. And although, yeah, we see in those struggles from the women's standpoint, but again, I don't believe that it's any easier for the man. Again, they all WWE superstars, and they all go into the crazy schedule. They all have like to have to balance the life and this crazy schedule, and to watch how it's basically like affecting their lives. It's actually an interesting thing, so we might talk about that too throughout these streams. And again, considering the fact that Total Divas and Total Bellas are not consistent, so they're kind of ending at some point. Like not that many weeks ago, Total Bellas are ended, now Total Divas are started, so again, we're not going to talk about them forever. But because they might affect my kind of predictions when it comes down to the matches and whatever. Even though considering the fact that they shot before the actual like current events. So right now, for instance, Total Divas started with pre-WrestleMania weekend, which was kind of a long time ago already. So nevertheless, so yeah, again, we will start with basically probably the main roster. So we are quickly going to talk about like what's transpired again on 205 Live. We'll start with 205 Live. So with 205 Live, Lio Rush basically kind of didn't want to compete this week because he kind of tied himself to the Bobby Lashley thing as a manager, and because of it, he didn't necessarily, I don't know, was ready to compete, and Drake Maverick didn't necessarily like that, and he said to him, like, if you're not going to compete, you're basically going to be fired. I mean, whatever. So next week you have to basically fight Noam Dar. So next week we're going to see Lio Rush fighting Noam Dar, which is pretty cool. Again, like, I love the new shape of the new Noam Dar, and like, I actually liked him a lot from Cruiserweight Classic. He was pretty cool then, and he one of those superstars who basically has a lot of potential, although he's super young. And it's pretty good to pair him with the same young type of superstar, 24 piece of gold, or 23. Oh yeah, 23 years old piece of gold, Lio Rush. Again, definitely looking forward to see what Lio Rush is going to bring to the table. He definitely kind of brings this dynamic that they tried to bring with Enzo Amore before he got fired, like the little bit more like talking and less necessarily fighting, which some people would disagree with me that 205 Live needs talking, because most of the people who actually watch 205 Live watch it for the action. But again, we need entertainment, and we need storytelling, and the only way that storytelling works if it's inside of the context of some type of a feud. If you like, you can tell a pretty awesome stories on like throughout the match, and it's awesome when it happens. But again, if there's no context like outside of the match, the audience not going to be that much invested, I believe. And in order to make this investment more, I believe 205 Live needs to put more time on developing actual kind of characters, and again, and in order to make matches better. So it doesn't mean that they don't have to basically create any type of feuds or whatever. Again, we need stories regardless, but those stories need to be better than they are now, and especially better than they were before. And the only way to do that, it's again maybe do like less matches. They still kind of creating only 2 matches per show. One match is usually a super big one with awesome techniques and whatever, and the other one's kind of pretty cool too. But again, I get where 205 Live is coming from when it comes down to structuring the show from less talking and more kind of action oriented kind of television. But again, I still believe that it will definitely make matches more for the viewers more appealing if they're actually going to put more time in developing bigger storylines, more than just like Lucha House Party fighting against whatever. So it's weird. So for instance, yeah, talking about Lucha House Party, we saw a pretty sick and pretty cool match, Lince Dorado again against TJP, when TJP won by basically demasking Lince Dorado, which is, again, as we know, for the luchadors is a sacred thing for most of them, except Andrade Cien Almas, whatever. So and again, that was a pretty cool ending, and this is the type of personality, this is the type of personal vendetta, or I don't know, personal feud that we could that you could actually create for 205 Live. Something that basically works with, I don't know, like disrespect, or something super personal that for the person it's too important. Not just like, you cheated and now I'm going to pay you back and whatever. No, the actual like psychological element needs to be present, and so far it didn't necessarily was present. Not in a full spectrum, of course. So definitely waiting for Buddy Murphy to fight Cedric Alexander on a Super Showdown. This is one of the most anticipated matches of that show, I believe, for me personally. Yeah, Showtime, Percy Watson. Oh yeah, whatever. If you remember him from NXT, the first days of the NXT. The early days, I would say. So, and the second match that we saw is Drew Gulak against Cedric Alexander. This was probably their first, like, truly awesome match. Again, they already thought on a pay-per-view before, but probably on SummerSlam. But actually, what they did, like, on 205 Live, that was freaking sick. I mean, it was definitely an awesome one. I mean, not super instant classic, because if we will talk about, for instance, what transpired on NXT, yeah, we will get to that. So again, this is the only thing that happened on 205 Live. Again, TJP fought with basically Dorado, won by demasking him, removing the mask completely, not just like, but like, that's it. So he just needed to cover himself. Apparently he's bald. Now we know it. So okay, he's not bald, he's just, yeah, shaved his head. So, of course, we didn't saw his face. Camera was pretty tolerant towards that, I mean, and yeah, that was weird, but still, that was pretty cool. Hopefully this feud will get somewhere, and TGP will fight not against the whole Lucha House Party, but actually against some type of one-on-one feud, such as Lince Dorado. Yeah, continuing. So, again, Gulak and Alexander showed also a match. That was cool. Leo Rush next week is going to fight Ali, Dar, and Ali is going to fight Hideo Itami next week too, which basically got figured out throughout the show. Yeah, this is kind of sums up 205 Live. There's nothing to talk about. Usually we're going to talk about brief results, and also we're going to talk about the actual stories, and if there's not going to be any stories, we're just going to talk about matches and sweep to the next one, like whatever. So going back to the NXT, so NXT was pretty sick. I mean, we saw Deonna Purrazzo fighting with Dakota Kai, which is basically a couple of weeks ago. They decided to basically create a temporary alliance and fought against Lacey Evans, hopefully I properly say her name. Yep, Lacey Evans. Oh yeah, by the way, it's going to be much easier if we're going to switch to NXT. Skibidi paboom. So yeah, Lacey Evans and who? And Aliyah. They're basically fought. No, don't tell me there was a hair somewhere. Yeah. Aliyah and Lacey Evans fought against Deanna Praza, which is again a newcomer to NXT. She just got signed. She's a participant in a Young Classic, which we're going to talk about. And it was a pretty cool match. The only problem with this match that I had is the fact that almost the whole match, Aliyah and or Aliyah, I don't know how you probably call her name, depends who you're going to talk to. And Lacey Evans was dominating completely the whole match, and the one of the problems that like we didn't saw that much of a Dakota Kai. Most of the match, like basically, Deanna Purrazzo was kind of under control of those two. It was weird, but still, the match was pretty cool, and it was definitely a interesting combination. Then we saw the Dream interview, which was again concentrated on his pure charisma and his unbelievable talent, that he is the best, and the only attention that needs to be focused is only on him, not on anyone else. They kind of asked him about Aleister Black. Of course, he avoided the question. Why would you ask me that? Talk about Dream only. So again, Valentine Dream is freaking sick. I mean, like that type of confidence definitely gives him, I don't know, like crazy push to the main roster, which I don't believe that is going to go soon, but hopefully sooner than later. Then we saw Street Profits in a weird, and I don't know, I barely understood what they talked about. I don't know, they tried to say something, but I don't know, either I didn't necessarily listen, or I just didn't understood because of my like language barrier maybe. But again, I just didn't necessarily understood what they talked about. They got asked questions, they talked about something, and then they got out in the car, and that's it. The only thing that I liked is how Montez Forward is basically talking. He's definitely an awesome on microphone, and he definitely has charisma. And again, I already talked about the fact that he definitely has an it factor, which not necessarily present for Angelo Dawkins, and because of this they create a pretty interesting combination. But again, Montez Forward definitely kind of seems like a star in this kind of tag team with it factor. Again, he's capable. He is like to do something in the ring, although he sometimes like appears a little bit greenish, like not necessarily experienced, but still their combination definitely works. They kind of reminding me a Crime Time with JTG and Shad Gaspar. Again, Shad Gaspar would be this, and JTG kind of would be Montez Forward. The only like, because they are Street Profits, and they kind of like a gang, but a good one, and those Crime Time was gang too. Again, like this relationship with the gangs and whatever. But again, and the type of dynamic that they're creating, kind of a little bit similar. But again, yeah. So the next thing is for Forgotten Sons. Again, we saw the debut of Jack Riker, which was pretty impressive. He fought against Roberto Corrillo, the guy that basically looked like a young Tyson Kidd. Personally, for me, he actually looked like a Tyson Kidd. I don't know, especially in the first glimpse. Like once I saw him, he's like, "Oh, this is Tyson Kidd and as a young kid." No, it was not, but still, that was pretty cool. So, and the main event was a freaking Pete Dunne versus Ricochet. Damn, that was a match. I mean, come on, talking about storytelling, talking about, oh, I'm not going to like discuss the match. Definitely look at it. Definitely see it. This was like the instant classic. Unfortunately, like spoiler alert again, it wasn't finished because it was pretty understandable that if Pete Dunne is going to fight Ricochet and both are going to fight for the title, and basically it will mean when both titles on the line, one of them is going to win and the other one is going to lose all. It's probably not necessarily a good idea to make this type of match on an actual NXT, not on a takeover. And I was suspected of the fact that, you know, this match is not going to end the regular way. Like I wanted for it to end the regular way, that actually Pete Dunne will basically take both titles and go on UK NXT, which was my prediction. But again, it didn't happen. It was foolish of me to think that Undisputed Era got involved, and then War Raiders got involved. Back to like following and Undisputed Era, this match was basically got finished by disqualification, and there was a draw, and both of them basically kept their titles. But again, before that, they showed a pretty instant classic. This is definitely one of the matches that basically will be in a history books, because again, it was freaking awesome. Again, everything that Pete Dunne does since he actually arrived into a WWE kind of spectrum, or basically into WWE scope, he definitely, I don't know, he's definitely one of those type of wrestlers that is going to be here forever. I mean, if he actually will continue, he will 100% will become a legend. I mean, his viciousness, he's a perfect wrestler. I mean, the psychology on the ring, he tells a perfect story on the ring, in the ring. I don't know, I definitely would want to see him fight against Daniel Bryan or some type of AJ Styles, whatever. It would be a mind-blowing thing. I don't know. Ugh. Waiting, hoping, and hopefully it's going to happen at some point. So yeah, on that note, we're going to continue, because again, we need to cover it in about 30 minutes or so. We have about 4. We're going to quickly talk about Mae Young Classic, and the rest of the things we will probably discuss once we will kind of start the video, because again, this session is probably going to be a little bit longer because of it, or not. I don't know. Maybe I just basically put this 2 hours on a fast track and on a 2-speed, because I don't believe in the actual real time this recording is going to be too long. But either way, because I'm going to talk about creative in most cases in here. So yeah, so let's go into the again for those who didn't saw Mae Young Classic, again, spoiler alert. So in this Mae Young Classic episode, we basically saw again 4 matches. So let me find those matches. I believe they were somewhere in the bottom. I don't necessarily remember the actual kind of oh yeah, I remember. So the show started with Caitlyn against Kavita Devi. That was pretty clear that Caitlyn is going to win. It was not a no-brainer. Again, the only problem with this match that I kind of established, I thought that Caitlyn is going to dominate a little bit more. She didn't necessarily show that much, and instead Kavita Devi basically dominated the whole match, which was kind of understanding, because again, if you're going to give a win to Caitlyn, which is again returning superstars, that was at some point at WWE. Actually, it was in my days when I actually started WWE, and for me, like, see her after these 9 long years, it's actually pretty awesome. I mean, I always love to see the old superstars that basically leaving the company and then getting back. It's always, for me, it's pretty interesting kind of dynamic, and it doesn't matter what, like, the reasons why they left. I always happy to see them back. It's kind of the element of nostalgia, and it's always a good thing. So, and although I didn't necessarily like Caitlyn at that time, I don't know, because she's kind of was overpushed. They gave her title too fast. It was weird, I don't know, and she held it not that long, I believe, and I don't know, it was weird. Again, the thing that happened at that time with women's division was far from perfect, and most of the people at that point didn't need it. They all kind of was, I don't know, kind of negative towards women division, although I liked it like right from the beginning, and I definitely had hopes right from the beginning. I probably was one of those people who actually liked and wanted for divas of that time to actually give them a chance even then, because I saw that they tried, and I saw that company didn't necessarily put time into those matches, and we saw talent. We saw Gail Kim. I loved Gail Kim and what she was capable of. One of my favorite superstars at that time was again AJ. We already talked about AJ, but again, AJ was a little bit closer to the divas kind of revolution and whatever, women's revolution at that time. So yeah, we're not going to talk about that, because again, we could touch upon the subject for infinite amount of times. Let's just say that I love that Caitlyn is back. Definitely an element of nostalgia. He definitely changed, but changed in a good way. Before that, she was kind of uncomfortable and weird. Right now, she's definitely confident, and she looks like she knows what she needs and what she wants, and she's definitely hopefully going to grab it. Although I don't believe that she's going to go all the way and win, because again, we saw that Brian Kendrick got back in the cruiserweight division and didn't got that far, but at least she's going to go up to the probably, I don't know, in a something, I don't know, maybe to the middle definitely, but then probably lose. It all depends against who's going to fight. We're not going to right now talk about the next matchups. We're going to wait till the whole round is going to finish, and then we're going to create the new pairings. Right now we're going to basically work with those. So again, pretty clear, Caitlyn won. It was a pretty decent match. Yeah. The next match probably was so this is good. This was a main event, I believe. Yeah, the next match was Toni Storm against Ginny. Right here, I definitely got basically Toni Storm. Basically, definitely was for me a favorite, and she won. Again, we remember her from the first Mae Young Classic. I definitely was impressed by Ginny. The thing about this match that I didn't like too is the fact that Toni Storm didn't show that much. Again, I know that she's capable of a lot of things, but because of the fact that she needed to win, Ginny dominated the whole match, and she's actually super sick. I mean, I definitely wanted, I was interested into seeing her and what she's capable of, but again, she's pretty cool. I mean, she's definitely could create a pretty interesting stories inside of the ring, and this is one of the things that I liked about her. She's pretty athletic, she moves kind of awkwardly, but at the same time it works. I mean, it was kind of the same way as with Emma, so Emma kind of had an awkward moves, but it worked, and the same kind of with her. She's less awkward than Emma maybe, but still she definitely works, and no, she has a pretty interesting and unique moveset. She's aggressive, which is something that works lately with women's division. One of the things that basically makes women's division different from the previous Divas division. Before that, they didn't necessarily hit themselves that much, and right now it could become pretty vicious in terms of the actual hitting, and this is one of the things that audience love, like the roughness of the matches, of the women's matches, which wasn't present before necessarily. Again, the first time that we saw this kind of ruthless aggression from Cena was probably when Lita fought Trish Stratus, and yeah, and occasionally from different type of matches from on and off, but yeah, this is, I believe, one of the reasons that made the revolution, the fact that women started to basically hold back, and once company gave them a chance, they showed that they could create something kind of special. So yeah, the next match was probably Karen Q and Xia Li. Yeah, once I basically saw them and actual reality. Before that, I kind of confused. I didn't remember who I liked more, either Xia Li or Mia Yim, because again, they didn't necessarily play a big part on the first Mae Young Classic, and because of this, I kind of quickly forget about them. But again, I definitely remember them from the first part, and once I saw them, I 100% remember my favorite. So I liked in Xia Li the fact that she is actual martial artist. So I love martial arts overall, and she actually showed a pretty awesome stuff, and they actually created a pretty decent dynamic together. This one Karen Q has some type of martial arts too behind her belt, and it's basically awesome. It was created an awesome dynamic, and overall this show was the best so far. I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, the overall show, like the matches, was pretty awesome, and And this match was pretty cool too. Again, it was, I would think that this match would be better for some reason, but it still was kind of a decent match. Yeah, now of course right here, Mayhem won, and Ashley K or Allison K lost. She actually fights pretty interesting. She has definitely an interesting style, and they actually showed it, like this type of viciousness and aggression that I would want them to show. That's pretty cool. And we saw Shelton Benjamin, so apparently he didn't fired. Oh, he wasn't fired, because I got scared that Shelton Benjamin disappeared somewhere, and I didn't know where he actually is, but we saw him. He supported me on the back in an audience. Yeah, so this is kind of everything that I wanted to cover again, and there's not that much to talk. Again, we're going to do this type of thing from now on. I guess we're going to quickly cover the things about WWE. We're going to talk about that way with the visuals. Then we're going to basically launch the actual video and watch the process, the creating process. And while this creative process is going to happen, I'm going to talk mostly about creative process, what I'm doing, what type of problem I'm having during this process, and also we are going to sometimes get back to the WWE, of course, if there's going to be any audience to discuss WWE and etc. And in most cases, in the future, I believe I'm going to just like right away create something during the stream and talk about things right at the same time. But for now, still, since I still don't have that much of experience in sculpting, still getting it, this kind of thing is going to be in a little bit different way. So, okay, let's launch and save change. Do you want to save playlist? No, there's no playlist here. So yeah, now I'm going to launch the actual video that, again, this video is going to be a 2-hour video. I'm probably going to make it with the speed of 2, because again, I don't believe that I'm going to sit in here for 2 hours and talk about for 2 hours. Let's just again launch it, make it with the speed of 2, which will make it a little bit faster, and I'm going to basically and yeah, and you're going to see these 2 hours of recording videos and speed up twice of me trying to make the previous anatomy that we established look like CM Punk first, a little bit more look like CM Punk, because right now it definitely doesn't look like CM Punk. It definitely looks like a certain person, but again, kind of, it's pretty far from CM Punk. So the first thing that I did in here is I decided to, of course, like change the proportions. So the first proportion that I changed, of course, is the sculpt, because we remember that we're working with high structural engineering dependency, and we need to change, if we're going to change one thing, we're going to change all things. So because of this, I needed to basically misplace ears, because now they're much further away. I actually placed the ears a little bit differently. A little later I will make them bigger. So again, throughout the session I made a lot of changes like this, and what I'm doing right now is just I'm basically making proportional tweaks to already established anatomy that we did, and after that I'm going to make this anatomy better. So yeah. So again, just trying to do things like, yeah. I actually don't know what to talk about. I mean, it's pretty weird to look at what you're doing and describe it. This is something that I need to learn for my future videos, because at some point I believe I'm going to create like similar videos on YouTube, and I'm going to talk about certain topic, and while I'm going to talk about, there's going to be some type of a back video playing. So yeah, I definitely understood that the ear is too far. I actually kind of tweaked it before already, got it closer, got it higher. So throughout the session I will figure out that the ear is too small. This is the first problem, and it's probably even small right now. I maybe will make it bigger like later. So, and most of the session I actually struggled with the fact that like I didn't know where exactly to work on making this character look like CM Punk, because again, when you're dealing with the Skull, it's pretty hard to make Skull look like an actual person, because again, you're not necessarily dealing with an actual person. One of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm trying to, by putting those eyes together in the middle, is trying to kind of measure the distance between two eyes, because we know that like anatomically and proportionally, the distance between two eyes is the exact one eye. It's not 100% true though, but again, I needed to establish like what's exactly there. So the next thing, of course, after I made changes to the skull itself, now I'm trying to make the same changes to the head, and it completely changes everything. The thing about like working with proportions and with the human faces, as I established previously and I talked about it previously, is the fact that working with faces, it's all about subtleties. Subtleties are the most important thing to think about, and if you're going to change things slightly on a couple of centimeters or millimeters, it's going to completely change the whole look. And we're going to actually look through this recording, and like the transformation is going to be barely visible because it's going to happen like gradually. But if you would see the previous result and the final result, it's completely different person. And throughout the whole session, the only thing that I did is I made small tweaks in the proportions. And the reason why it's better to do this on this stage, because again, before going into the actual sculpting stage, I mean, when we're actually going to build on top of it the actual anatomy, or not the anatomy, but the actual CM Punk's face, I wanted to make sure that my anatomy part is going to look as close as possible to the CM Punk. And I spent a great deal of time doing this. Again, it was a lot of corrections, so again, we made shoulders wider, because again, when I did shoulders previously, I didn't necessarily made it right. So now since we made eyes a little bit closer, we need to put them back on the place that they are, and trying to establish the difference between those. Again, throughout this kind of recording, it was all about subtleties, and this is the thing when it comes down to working with portraits, especially if you're drawing something from the real life and you actually try to portray some type of a character, already existing character. Because I believe if I would create my personal character, I would just I would work with subtleties, yes, but in most cases I would keep this character the way that it looks already, because it already looks like an actual character. I mean, yes, we could definitely add a little bit more expression to this character and make it look a little bit more like personal, add some eye symmetry to that. As I said before, one of the things that will make CM Punk look like CM Punk later is the asymmetrical elements, because again, right now it's completely symmetric, because again, in order to make work a little bit less complex for us, we kind of using this symmetry element to it by working on one side, and that way we build in the second side too. So again, it was a lot of kind of problems in most cases. Like in the time when this basically sculpting process freezes, this is me taking time to look at the second screen and reassessing the look of the CM Punk from the different references, because the problem is, in most cases, we're barely seeing the static face of the CM Punk. So his brows are pretty down, and our sculpture actually has eyebrows pretty high. And again, the reason why they are high, because of the eye socket, the size of the eye socket that we established before. But in reality, even if your eye socket is high in here, the brows are definitely going to be a little bit like under the eye socket a little bit, or pretty close to it, especially in men. Women has a little bit higher eyebrows, and men have a little bit less, like lowered eyebrows. And because of this, again, CM Punk has pretty like lowered eyebrows. In most references and most photos, he actually looks pretty frowny. And because of this, it's pretty hard to establish for me personally this element of like the actual expression. And one of the things that I've struggled with is I didn't want it to create an actual expression, and I tried to stay away from it. I actually tried to create an actual I don't know, neutral face in order for then to make it look a little bit more expressive. Because again, anatomy, usually if we're studying anatomy, usually it's static. Once we will start to make some type of character, we will try to make this anatomy dynamic. And since and we can't study dynamic anatomy in most cases because without understanding how anatomy looks in the static, because we're not going to connect those pieces together. So first we need to understand how anatomy works in static and how these muscles are actually positioned in static, because this is the perfect way for us to understand the actual placement for those muscles and create those patterns in our brain, and those kind of that will be considered as a building blocks of our anatomy skills. And then it's going to be kind of like a scheme in our brain. So for instance, what I look like when I'm looking at this anatomy, most of these things I actually created from my brain, not from the references, because I remember so good this anatomy in my brain that I actually could draw it without using any references. Not like everything, again, in some places I probably will mess up, but again, most of these muscles I know how they work, because we know that we have the whole area of the mouth, then this area of the mouth has corners, and out of these corners we having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 branches. We know that there's 5 branches. They go from the corner, almost not all of them, 4 of them going from the corner, and 1 of them is going from a little bit closer to the basically sides of the bottom part of the lip. So the structure of muscles you actually can learn pretty easy. I mean, there's the anatomy of the face not that complex as a human body. Anatomy of the human body is pretty crazy. So right now I actually disabled a perspective mode and trying to look how things are looking outside of the perspective. So one of the things that I figured out is basically, again, I worked on the neck. I tried to make neck less big because again, CM Punk doesn't have that crazy big neck with big muscles. Like for instance, Brock Lesnar has crazy big neck. CM Punk doesn't have that. He doesn't have also these pecs, I believe they're called, pectoral muscles. Or no, pecs is probably this. I forgot the muscle names, sorry about that. So yeah, he doesn't have that. I actually could open the reference and talk about muscles, maybe? I don't know, it could be a good idea. Yeah, trapezius. So he doesn't have this big trapezius muscle, and because of this, it kind of a little bit less bulgy. Not the same as some superstars have. So in most cases, what I'm doing right now by working on nose in most cases doesn't have that many muscles. The only muscle that nose has is the nasals, or nasalis, the muscle they call basically nasalis. It basically covers this area, but again, since we're working with pretty low resolution, it's pretty hard to establish it. The last are the cartilages. So the cartilage of the nose, it's not necessarily a bone. Again, it's a cartilage. And what we're doing now is basically trying to establish the actual look for the CM Punk's nose, because before that it was just a regular nose, but CM Punk's actually has a completely kind of, I don't know, flat nose under, and I spent a lot of time today to actually observing CM Punk's face and these small elements of his face and details, which is something that you need to do if you study in a certain character and certain actually real superstar or person, because you will start to notice things that you didn't notice before in their faces, because our brain usually works with faces on a kind of an abstract level. It simplifies things, and it makes things super simple for us to clearly understand it, use it, and that's it. It's to recognition. So we're using of course our brain to recognize faces, not to rebuild them from the ground up. And as artists, we need to learn how to look at faces a little bit differently. So, and because of this, we need to pay attention to the small details, to these small subtleties that no one ever is going to pay attention to. Maybe even the person itself that we're drawing or painting or sculpting, it's not going to even know that he or she has this by looking at themselves in the mirror throughout their life, they're probably not even going to know that they have this, because again, artists are usually kind of noticing the things that other people are not noticing at all, and this is what makes, I believe, personally me, for me, like being an artist is something that basically makes me, I don't know how to put it properly. Truly don't know. So basically, the fact that we're noticing things that other people are not noticing, it basically at the end much more rewarding, because instead of just taking things for granted, we're seeing things in a way that we will start to appreciate them more. And if, for instance, like before that, we could look at different people and see like one person is much prettier than the other person, especially considering the fact that like we know like what is the commercial look, like the super beauty element to it, and we all like, and we see this beauty in like in commercials and everywhere on the billboards. So there's not necessarily we don't see the real people that often in terms of the look. They are kind of polished and I don't know, with makeup, and they didn't necessarily present themselves in a real way, which is something that I don't like about, by the way, the fact that most of the women in WWE for some reason are using so much makeup that it sometimes look awful. I don't know what's the deal about that. I mean, there is a decent makeup sometimes in certain people, like in certain women of WWE, but in most cases they're overusing makeup. And I actually thought about it like from different standpoints, not only from the fact that I didn't necessarily like this overusage of the makeup, but I actually kind of tried to think about it, why it happens, why they're overusing your makeup. And I believe one of the reasons why they're overusing your makeup is because of the lighting of the wrestling. Because if you're not going to put any makeup at all, your face is just going to become flat here, and you're not necessarily going to recognize a person from the far. But again, it works for the men. They're pretty recognizable from far, maybe because they have a little bit more harsh kind of features, and since women have more soft features of the face, maybe because of this they intentionally putting too much makeup on their face, especially on the eyes, on the eye area and the lips area, to make these faces look more recognizable from the distance. This is the only explanation that I have why they are overusing your makeup. I don't know what's the actual science behind that. Maybe they're just overusing your makeup. I don't have a clue. But again, sometimes they're completely overusing their makeup and they look like truly awful. I mean, in real life they're all awesome. Again, I believe there's no ugly people, almost especially as an artist. I don't see people as ugly. Like, every person has their uniqueness to the face, and this is one of the things that I'm getting back to when it comes down to the actual look of the person. And again, most of the people, they have this separation, like what, from ugly and pretty person, like because they have some type of a, I don't know, basically regular understanding what ugly people looks and like pretty person looks. But again, I don't necessarily see this element. Of course, like some faces are a little bit more appealing than the others. This is definitely the case, and there's undeniable fact behind that. And there's an actual science that basically what makes the perfect face, like some type of a mirror symmetry, whatever, like the perfect placement of the features, whatever. But in most cases it doesn't matter, because the pretty face could look bad in a different types of expressions, because again, expressions make the face not it's static, and if statically the face of the person looks pretty decent and super pretty, it doesn't mean that it's going to be pretty all the way. We all know that like even a pretty person could make a weird face and become ugly. So because of this, I don't believe that we need to kind of like separate this like the look element at all. And especially as an artist, you will stop doing this at some point. Like in the beginning, maybe you will choose more prettier person than, I don't know, and you will create a little bit, like you will create faces based on the appeal, and you will actually create like faces that are like appealing to you, or that you find appealing. It doesn't matter the gender. Like you could find appeal in men faces and in women's faces and whatever. It doesn't matter, and the age doesn't matter. Again, appeal is always kind of, it's something that you can't basically establish necessarily. It's something that either there or not there. But again, I believe that um, every person has this their own kind of pretty look and their non pretty look. I don't know why I'm actually talking about the subject. It seems weird because again, it's not the topic that people are usually talking about, because again, nowadays people are so freaking I don't know, touchy about any type of subject like this. Once you will start to talk about like the look and like, I don't know, of the other person, it like, it seems like you're body shaming them or face shaming them or whatever. Again, people are so nowadays are so, how to properly put it, again, just touchy. Like no matter what you're going to say, they're going to turn it upside down, completely use it in a perverted way, like you didn't mean it, and you have to be careful with speaking about those things. And again, I'm not talking about like the fact that um, I'm talking about from the artistic standpoint. And every time that I'm going to talk about appeal, every time that I'm going to talk about the actual kind of look and making things look like so-called pretty, but yeah, you're never calling them pretty, because again, we know that every person looks at at the same person differently. So one person could find the same person, different people could find the same person either appealing or not appealing to them personally. So because of this, I don't believe that this element of appeal is actually important. And what I like about wrestling, they didn't necessarily choosing this element. So before that, in wrestling, they actually tried to choose in main events and like the superstar that actually look pretty. Nowadays, they're completely not using this. I mean, they started to diversify in the looks, which is something that I love about this, because now I have a big variety of people that look completely different. Again, some of them are more appealing, some of them are less appealing, but they all have their own personal appeal, which again, not probably works for every person. But as an artist, you have to create some type of like, I don't know, um, elements of blindness to ugliness, because there's no ugliness, because every person's face um, has some type of element of appeal, and when you start to work with the person's faces, you will start to understand this appeal. And again, this is kind of a weird topic. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about right now. I probably shouldn't even talk about this, but again, this is something, this is that, by the way, right now I'm trying to establish a weird type of muscle. So once we will finish those muscles, now I'm trying to establish this big muscles, which called platysma. This muscle basically covers, it goes from here, and basically it goes up to the neck and up to the clavicles. It's pretty big. The only reason why I'm not like drawing her completely, because that way I'm going to erase the anatomy under it. So I decided to draw platysma next stage, after we will actually copy the CM Punk and we'll work on his final facial features. So okay, getting back to the appeal, because again, appeal is personal, I believe, and every person has their own personal appeal. Because again, you usually attract people by look, in reality, um, but again, when you're working with portraits, you will start to appreciate every type of face. Of course, you will still have your own personal kind of, I don't know, how do you probably say it, preferences when it comes down to what you like, what's appealing to you, what not. But in most cases, you will become neutral to almost every face. And this is, I believe, the way that we need to look at faces as an artist. Because perfectly symmetrical faces, getting back to what we're seeing right now, they are freaking boring. They don't have personality. They don't have almost, like, I don't know, they look like a freaking mannequin. Like, no one likes to look at mannequin. No one finds mannequin appealing. Probably only sick people, I don't know. So I'm actually afraid of mannequins. Every time that I'm like moving closer to the mannequin, I'm freaking out. Like, it's actually weird for me to go in closer to the mannequin. I kind of look like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I know that there are people who are actually afraid of mannequins and clowns. I don't like clowns either. So again, so getting back to what we're talking about again, the appeal, it's something that you need to find in each person, because again, the more you will look at a person, like, at first this person might not attract you in terms of the appealing, but the more you will spend with this person, the more you will start to see things that you didn't saw before, small expressions, small kind of, I don't know, weird elements that you didn't saw before, and you will start to look at this person differently. And getting back to what we're doing right now we're basically trying to break this element of mannequinness and supersymmetry, and a little bit later we'll actually make this like look more like CM Punk, because again, as I said before, CM Punk has completely asymmetrical face, and this asymmetry is barely visible. You need to actually look closer to it. And again, every time that you're working with portraits, I believe you need to actually observe the face of the person that you're drawing for a long time. Right now we're basically working on a unrelated thing. I don't believe that we need to work on this part because I'm not going to show it in the actual final portrait. But again, I just decided, okay, I'm studying anatomy, and since I'm studying anatomy, why not do it? It's better do it. Again, for me, this is not necessarily a kind of a fun art portrait. Again, although I was a fan of the CM Punk before, right now I didn't necessarily a fan, because first he quit WWE and he got like an altercation with them, and the fact that he's pretty, I don't know, it's a pretty weird person himself. He's on his own mind, and right now he, for me, kind of, I don't know, I lost a little bit of respect for him for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because of his behavior, because I'm trying to kind of put things together and look at how he behaves and how would I have behaved in his kind of situation, and of course I would behave in a different way. But again, it seems like judging, but again, I'm just analyzing, and again, you never know like why people are doing things that they're doing. We're not going to talk about that. So again, I'm not judging. For me, I'm just kind of disappointed a little bit that CM Punk's basically ruined his career because of this. I believe that the only future that he has is in wrestling, and the fact that he is completely distant himself from the wrestling because of this problem that he had with WWE basically not necessarily will help him to utilize his potential, because I believe that he needs to be in wrestling. He's awesome on the mic. He definitely can create an awesome stories in the ring, and what he's trying to do in UFC, it's not his thing. I believe he's a little bit delusional when it comes down to what he's pursuing right now, because again, it's not his place, and if he wants to make this his place, he needs to spend from 10 to 15 years to get there, and I don't know. It's just my opinion. So yeah, again, what we're trying to do, we're trying to make CM Punk look a little bit more like CM Punk. Again, it's pretty far down the road, because again, later I will put his brows a little bit down, a little bit like down. I will make his eyes a little bit squinchy, because right now his eyes are definitely not looking like his eyes. Steampunk usually are like looking a little bit, his eyes are pretty small. He, even if he's going to open them closed, like clearly you're never going to see his eyes like completely open like this. So again, we're trying to like drift away from the base look that we established with this anatomy, to something that looks a little bit more like steampunk. And along the way, we're studying anatomy. So again, one of the reasons why I'm like focusing on everything that I'm doing right now, which is not important, I'm probably not going to use it in an actual portrait, it's just to make things like educational for me personally, because every time that you're sculpting something that you didn't sculpt it before, and for me this is my first sculpt of that caliber, you always go into it's better when you are using this opportunity to study as much things as possible, because this is your chance to learn things that you didn't necessarily knew before. Again, every time that you will do this, I believe, especially for me, what I noticed once I dealt with this, this structural way that we established, that we created a skull first, then we like, of course, first we created the base for the skull, then we created the skull itself, then we started to put on top of the skull muscles, and only then we will get to the actual face. It actually kind of works for me personally, because it creates this gradual work, layer by layer, that will help me to make this face look more realistic. Because again, if we would skip this process, it wouldn't look like face at all. I mean, I'm 100% sure if I wouldn't sculpt it a skull, if I wouldn't sculpt it this type of anatomy, I wouldn't, and if I would try to sculpt steampunk right away on the freaking base, just a regular base, I would end up with horrible results. Unproportional, no form, no nothing, no anatomy under, and it already looks like a person. So we could actually stop right here, polish it, and actually make the actual person out of it. So which kind of blows me away, like the fact that we use this structural engineering dependency that we talked about before, again, which means that we are built something from the with high structural engineering dependency, which is the face. Again, high structural engineering dependency, as it's my concept that I come up with. It basically means that we started with not just a regular like primitive base for the head, and then right away use this base to sculpt the face, but instead we used a high structural engineering dependency, because if we would use just a regular face or head shape, and then would try to sculpt on top of this basic shape an actual face right away of the steampunk, it would be a low structural engineering dependency, and that way we wouldn't have that much of layers. So the only people who can do this, I believe, are experienced artists. So if you're experienced artist, then you could use a low structural engineering dependency, create a just basic primitive, and shape the whole face out of this basic primitive without even having troubles with it, because you have experience, you know where the shapes are, you know how form works, you don't need to kind of spend more time on it. But for inexperienced artists, high structural engineering dependency is the best solution, or middle structural engineering dependency, which we build an egg based upon. So basically, the concept of high structural engineering dependency, to repeat myself, is you're using reverse engineering to study the person that you're working with. So you're basically taking the photo, downloading it from whatever, from Google, you're putting it in a program, you reverse engineer it, you're trying to like figure out what skull for this person looks like. Of course, for that you need to have already kind of a basic knowledge of the anatomy and skull. It would be a good thing, but if you don't have it, you still could use the references for that, anatomical references. So then, once you will structurally re-engineered this back to the skull, you're getting back to putting on top of the skull anatomy. Once you will put anatomy on top of the skull, then you will add, by that of course I mean muscles. Then after that you're using, today my brain is dying, I don't know. Today session is weird, but again, it's fine. I'm going to make weird stops along the way. So then you use a what's happening? Oh yeah, right now I'm just making the neck a little bit look more like CM Punk's neck, and because again, CM Punk doesn't have that big of a like established muscles in here, and again, I'm trying to make him more and more look like proportionally. So again, what I'm doing right now is just basically working on proportions while I'm talking. So again, the high structural engineering dependency is basically going from the skull, from the basic primitive to the skull, then building on top of the skull the actual anatomy of the face using these facial features, what we're doing right now, then trying to make this, and by the way, along the way you have to make sure that you will be as close as possible to the actual proportions of the face that you're working with. It's much harder when you work with this type of, like with the skull and with the anatomy later, because again, you're probably not going to be able to take an actual like human's face and somewhat reverse engineer it into the skull, because it's super hard. You need to study a lot to do that, and have a lot of experience, I guess, which so hopefully the thing that I will get from this, because again, and then of course you will build upon it and build upon it and build upon it, make it better. So hopefully it's going to be that thing. So again, in the future I believe we're going to make things a little bit more structured. Right now they're kind of a little bit more chaotic, because again, I'm still establishing this. I promised myself that I will start streaming. Yeah, right now I'm trying to make a little bit of a smile. So this is, by the way, the way that we could make changes in an expression. So the more I observed CM Punk throughout today, the more I saw the things that I didn't saw before. But it's still, because we're working still on the anatomy and we didn't necessarily working on the final features, it's still not going to be 100% close. And because of this, I believe first we need to create it. Because of this, it's kind of like goes for this type of a build-up. When you basically start with the skull, you're trying to make skull look like CM Punk's skull. Then you will put muscles on top. You will try to make these muscles look like a CM Punk's face, closer and closer. It's still not going to 100% look like it. Then you will apply changes to everything. So right now you see, I figured out that the nose is much smaller, and now I'm applying the same changes to the skull. So, and you're kind of going back and forth, and it helps you to understand how to connect the actual face with the muscles and then with the skull. And this is the only reason why I'm doing this, I believe. So for me, it's a way to learn how to work with this, how to controllably, like in controlled way, create the character's face. It doesn't matter if I'm creating my own version of the character or drawing from the reference, doesn't matter. The method still applies, because that way, if you will build things from the skull, this definitely will help you to create a little bit more realistic results. So right now I'm doing this in sculpting, because for me it's more intuitive. I'm planning on doing the same thing with painting and with drawing. So is this the end? No, I guess right now I'm kind of looking through the references with CM Punk. Yeah, again, every type of freeze I'm revisiting the references, and I'm trying to establish different things. So right here he actually looks a little bit more like CM Punk, but when I'm putting it in a perspective, it's not necessarily works this way. And again, right now I'm trying to figure out, okay, CM Punk definitely has super low brows. And again, we're not necessarily putting down the skull itself. The skull stays there, but again, it's kind of a pulling down the fat and the skin thickness, which makes this kind of a transition. I don't know, I love this type of structured way of creating things, because when you have the underlying structure behind the face, it shows that you know what you're doing. But if you're just creating a basic primitive and then on top of this basic primitive you're creating a face, it just kind of shows you pure skill, but not necessarily your knowledge. I mean, maybe it's just my personal observation. I definitely kind of leaning towards artists that work in this way, and because of this, I decided to choose to work this way myself. So that use this structural way of creating things, because this structural way is actually easier. It seems harder because you have to do kind of twice that much work, because you need to create a skeleton. Like if you're working with the whole human body, you need to create muscles, then you need to put on top of those muscles other things, and it seems like too much work. But again, this is the only way I believe to actually learn and study how to do this. And then after you will study it, after you will get like pretty decent experience with it, you could skip those stages and work with a low structural engineering dependency, which is again going from the basic primitive right away into the final, because now you have this experience. But again, you have to start somewhere, and if you will just start basically drawing from photos and you're going to focus on repetitiveness, so the more you will repeat, the more you will understand this, it's not necessarily knowledgeable learning. It's just learning by skill, by repetition. And I personally don't believe that those skills will help you along the way more than the knowledgeable skills. Because if you will put knowledge behind this, behind repetition, because again, we're still going to use the repetition, but we're not going to use repetition in its purity. Because repetition in its purity, when you're just going to repeat one thing all over and all over again, you're going to mess up until you will basically start to draw it the right way. But with the drawing, which is the problem, it's not efficient, because if you will try to learn how to draw a nose in one position and you will repeat this process, and after 100 or 1000 tries you will manage to do that, you will still not understand the whole form of the nose. So you need to understand how nose works from multiple directions. You need to understand how nose is structured, how to create nose from different point of views. What if this nose is in dynamic and someone is touching it? So you're not going to know how to create this. So again, the structural way of creating, like learning by using structural engineering dependency for beginners and more than beginners, I believe this is the best way. And again, this is just me trying to push this concept. I don't believe that this is just a concept that I made myself. I mean, I made it my own. I mean, I figured out this kind of a step-by-step process and name it my own way, but I'm 100% sure that a lot of people already came up with the similar like methods and already using it, and I'm just not aware of it. So because again, I believe this is pretty cool kind of progression when you start with, when you work with in a controlled way, when you actually start with something controlled, which is skeleton. I mean, like, you can create a skeleton in sculpting, you can draw a skeleton, you can learn to draw a skeleton. This is something that you like, it doesn't take that much time, because again, these are just bones. They don't have to look super perfect and super 100% like real bones. They could look similar to real bones. Because of this, you don't have to create like perfectly awesome skull, because again, there's no such thing. Every skull looks differently, and there's a lot of ways to make a mistake. But this mistake, it's going to, like, even if you're going to create a wrong skull that is not going to fit necessarily a person, it's still going to be better than not having any skull, because then you can build the proper proportions on top of the skull, understanding how the muscles are placed on the skull itself. So again, yeah, so what I'm doing again, I'm just continuing to do the same stuff all over and over again. I'm trying to repeat things, I'm trying to make things better, I'm trying to make things look more CM Punk like, which is again for me it's a balancing act. I don't want to implement CM Punk's features at this stage, but at the same time I know that if I'm not going to, once I will duplicate this and build things on top of it, I will need to go back and revamp the whole thing all over again. So because of this, I better will spend time on making this stage look as much as CM Punk, and then I will be able to go into the next stage, because again we still didn't add all layers of fat. So right now the eyes are still just muscly, we don't have a fat area in here, it's empty, we don't have fat in here, we don't have like the cheeks added, we still don't have this element. So there's a lot of elements we still need to add, and this will actually make the CM Punk's face look like CM Punk's face more. And the last touch is going to be the adding asymmetry when we'll try to put his nose a little bit to the left or to the right, to his right, to our left, and try to make him look a little bit more like CM Punk. I still don't know how I'm going to finish this, so because this is the first sculpt for me, I don't know where to go with it. I don't know where to stop working on it. I don't know like what the extent of the detail that I need to go through. So right now we're working on 100 100,000 pixels or points, which is not that much, it's not a million, and basically 100k pixels or points, and it's still it's kind of enough for me to understand the face and like understand it, but I don't believe that I would present this face in this type of capacity, like in this quality, and this is something that I probably need to figure out, and this is one of the reasons why we're probably going to stay and continue to sculpt CM Punk up to the probably 10th session, because again for me it's just like I'm still adapting, and like since I'm just adapting, the first tries are going to be pretty dry and unexperienced, and it's completely fine, because again I want to provide a true experience, although not every person actually interested in this type of experiences. But again, you will see me start somewhere, and then you will see me go somewhere, and you will see this progression, and you will know that I started from somewhere. I not just appeared as crazy awesome artist that some people are doing, and didn't had any background like before that. I want to show like where I started. I want to show, and this is not necessarily my like actual start. Again, it's kind of a still progression, but again, I believe I'm heading towards good quality work, because this is something that I pursued throughout the years. I wanted to create a good quality work, and I learned and studied everything that I possibly could to make sure that I will create a good quality work. Not just good quality in terms of the appeal, but good quality in terms of the like all elements, the story, the design, the function, and etc. So, and in order to do that, of course, you need to have experience. I don't know, I'm just talking about nonsense right now. I mean, I'm trying to make his eyes a little bit pushed out a little bit, because again, I completely understand that we need to push them at some point. They're definitely not that deep inside. And one of the problems, by the way, there's no guide how to place an eyeballs inside of the eye socket. It's something that you need to basically learn with experience and create your own personal understanding of how to work with it, because again, it's not something that it's super clear and understandable. And again, one of the things that doesn't make this job easier is the fact that we didn't necessarily working with the actual face. The easiest way, by the way, to do this would be not to work by eye, but actually putting a CM Punk's photo on the background and tracing on top of it, which most of the sculptings are created. I mean, if you see a super hyper-realistic sculpture, it's 100% made this way. So there was a placed it was a placed photo on the background. There was a photo for the front portion of the face for the side of the face, to the right or to the left, and based on that the face was created. The last was added as just an element of likeness. Most of the kind of sculptors are working that way because they don't have time to eyeball things and create things by eye, unless they're studying, of course. Because again, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not doing this. I'm creating things by eye. I'm actually like studying observation. I'm studying observing things, how they actually look, trying to connect this element of observation, me looking at things and perceiving things in a certain way, and me, my hand, putting those things that I'm seeing in my brain right away into the canvas, or in this particular instance in on a sculpt. So that way I believe you could learn more efficiently than just creating a duplicate of a copy or duplicate of a photo that you placed on the background. Again, because that way, as I said before, you will notice things that you didn't notice before. You will notice this special appeal that we talked about that this person has, although you might not necessarily might find this person appealing. Again, it all comes down to the subtleties, and the only way to notice those subtleties is to make things by eye, like actually observe things and work with observation. Yeah, I'm trying to put the muscle even on top of the eyelids, because they are kind of getting lifted up by one big muscle. I'm probably pretty close to ending. Yep, it's about like 15 minutes left or so in this. Again, this week's session was weird, or these week's sessions was kind of weird a little bit, because I was super overloaded with things to do. I needed to watch a lot of WWE, because again they created so many content this week, so it's just crazy, and it's not ending. They will continue to create a lot of content. This week is all the way crazy. I mean, like next week there's going to be even crazier probably, because next week there's going to be another change to my streams in terms of like I'm streaming on Twitch Magic Arena, and now Magic Arena is finishing closed beta stage and heading into the open beta stage, which means that now I need to actually study the game, so which adds additional work, and I have my personal reasons on doing this, so I'm not just doing this for like weird reasons. This is actual like personal reasons that will help me to grow and learn things that I need to learn in order to do things that I need to do in the future. So, and because of this, basically what we're doing at CM Punk right now is it's the way for me to fast pace my learning process when it comes down to anatomy, fast pace my learning process when it comes down to portraits, create as many quality portraits as possible to get comfortable enough to start to paint things on my own. And once I will get there, I will be able to get out of the portraits, then start to create more complicated portraits, because right now we're just working with the simple portraits. Later I will work on complex portraits, and complex portraits are going to have more storytelling to them, and the final kind of destination is complex illustration, which will then grow into the graphic novels, but still for now it's a complex illustration. But before that we need to kind of go through this stage when we are starting with the simple portraits without necessarily like big story elements to them, just like studying anatomy, studying form, adjusting to the human form, adjusting to human faces, noticing the differences between women's and men's faces. So, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this too. I'm going to sculpt first. So for sculpting I started with CM Punk. With painting I will start with so for CM Punk male I'm starting with painting with female, so that way I'm going to basically, while I'm studying CM Punk, I'm learning the male proportions of the face, and while studying the painting of the Emily from Emily, the movie from 2001, I will be able to study, like as a contrast, the difference from the male face to the woman's face. And again, like I know the general differences between male and female face, but at the same time it still needs practice, and I need to understand how to put this in the sculpt in actual 3D form, because again, we know that like to create man's face, it's a little bit easier, although it has more details, because it has more sharp angles and more edginess to it. Women's face more soft, and because of this softness, it's much harder to give it a depth. And this is something that I will probably figure out throughout the sculpting. I probably made quite a mistake by starting with man's face and sculpting and female's face in painting, because for me drawing man's face a little bit easier because of this factor, because it can be a little bit more controlled, because women's face is less, it has less shape, because it's softer. It's much harder to find a good depth for it. This is the problem when you're looking at a lot of photos from models and whatever and superstars. So like there's the reason why they're putting a lot of makeup on themselves to pop up these forms of their faces, because without it, it just looks a little bit flat, especially on the camera and etc. Maybe this is the reason why women's division in WWE putting a lot of makeup. Maybe this is the actual reason, to look good on the camera, and not necessarily good, but to have this element of shape and form added to it. Either way, we're getting closer. I probably almost finished in here. I don't believe that I'm going to add that much in here. I'm just going to polish a couple of things, change things a little bit. They're small, kind of. Again, the longer you'll spend on this, the more you will understand that you cover almost everything that you could cover, and you can't move anywhere else. So, and it usually means that you need to take a break and revisit it a little bit later, because then your eyes will rest and you will start to notice new things. Because at that point, I believe I already noticed everything that it needs to be noticed at this stage, and then I started to, okay, maybe I will play with lips a little bit. Nope, it's not going to work. So again, then you will start to make a little bit weird decisions that might ruin the whole thing. So it needs to be careful with that. Again, I'm not giving any advices. I believe, like, if you are an inexperienced artist and you don't have zero experience, you might use this as an advice. But in most cases, I believe you already know what I'm talking about, and you didn't necessarily going to see this as an advice. Just use it as a, like, personalize this into your own personal experience and use it your own way. I mean, the way you want to use it, or not use it at all. Depends on, yeah. So again, I'm a big proponent of knowledge, regardless of the form of this knowledge. If this knowledge is present, you still could learn from it. But again, usually these streams are going to be in the format of questioning, hopefully in the future. Once I will create a decent work, people will gather, hopefully, and will want to learn something and get experience, and then hopefully they will ask some questions that I hopefully will be able to answer. But at this point, it's just kind of I'm learning myself. And I can't, the only thing that I could tell you is the potential direction of where it's going to go, and you can use this potential direction to start somewhere too if you don't know where to start. So even me talking about the structural engineering dependency, this is completely like raw concept. I just started to use it. I never used it before. I came up with this concept, I don't know, maybe like in the middle of this year, a couple of months ago, and since then I never tried it. It seemed logical, but only now I'm trying to actually utilize it and work with it. And although I'm talking about it, it's still a pretty raw concept that needs to be tested. And so far it works, but I don't know if it's going to work in painting or not. It definitely works in sculpting. And again, you're not going to be structurally dependent like all the time. There's going to be some type of areas that you don't need to do that. If you're already familiar with person's face, if you have experience, you don't have to go through these stages. You could just right away, as an experienced artist, use a low structural engineering dependency and start with the basic primitive and build the face on top of this basic primitive. But if you don't have this experience, if you need to learn somehow this thing, I believe high structural engineering dependency is a good way, because I'm using it to strengthen my skills and strengthen my knowledge, and actually learning a lot by doing this. Although yes, I'm doing kind of unnecessary job that it's not going to be present and visible, but again, maybe I will present this thing like in all stages. Maybe I will actually present the whole base, then I will show you okay, we're done. Preferences, speed of movements, go into threads, don't forget to use it constantly. Yeah, and maybe then I will, like, basically I could show you in a final result, not the final like sculpt of the CM Punk, but actual transition where I started. So for instance, we could actually start with this and show this, then we could show this as a second stage, and then we could show the final stage, and that way people will see that you actually created this with the knowledge behind it, not necessarily by just making things look like CM Punk randomly, by spending just a lot of time to make this face look like CM Punk, which is again almost every person capable of doing this, but actually build this from the ground up, like starting with the skeleton, go into the muscles. It takes knowledge, it takes skills, and you actually will get more out of it during the process. I believe so. Again, you might not agree with me, but again, unless you will try it, you will know. You're not going to know it. Especially, I guess, for the practitioners, this is probably the best way. I'm a theoretical person, and for me, even for me, this way it kind of seems logical. But again, you could use this method, I believe, regardless either you a theoretical person or you a practical person, because again, usually practical people, they learn more in practice than in theory, and for them going through this, especially that way, building things and like actually integrating the knowledge into it, I believe they're going to learn much more efficiently, because it's super efficient for the theoretical person too. Like me as a theoretical person, I definitely feel this efficiency because I definitely like the results. Because again, I don't believe that I would create the same results if I wouldn't start it with the skull, then put then muscles. Because again, figuring out the skull, you already create the base that allows you to understand where the muscles are connecting. You're just putting pieces together. It's like, I don't know, it's logic. So yeah, I'm probably not going to work on CM Punk right now. Again, I just don't feel like it. I'm super tired. I probably maybe even could end the session a little bit earlier. Wait a second. Yeah, I might add session a little bit a little bit earlier, because again, right now I'm getting back to my schedule, to the normal schedule. I'm trying to sleep well. I'm trying to work on things during the day, not during the night, as I did before. So, and I probably might kind of finish the session a little bit earlier, because again, we kind of discussed almost everything that I wanted to discuss. Again, in most cases, the way that I work with anatomy it actually seems efficient personally to me, because again, this person definitely looks like a person. I mean, this kind of anatomy thing. Once we will add a symmetry to it, once we will make it look more like CM Punk. It will definitely add more, will have more character. One of the things that I believe CM Punk definitely has a little bit bigger ears. Maybe we'll make them bigger, but again, I don't believe that it's going to be that much of importance. Although it all depends what type of characteristics will make character look like this character. So if CM Punk's ears are super noticeable, we can't disregard them because they might be the most noticeable thing about his character. For instance, if the eyes of the characters are super noticeable, we can't fake them into, like, we need to work on them the most. So again, usually I guess one of the things that you need to focus on, it kind of I guess applies to the caricature too, although I don't have experiences with working with character, but logically it seems like it, that you need to focus on the most prominent feature of the face, the feature of the face that stands out the most to you, and use this feature of the face that stands out the most as one of the features that you're going to work on the most. So, which is logically, and the features that stands out the less, you probably could fake and make like less look like. So since we're working with reality and not necessarily with caricature, it's much harder in this area because we can't like go to the extremes. We need to work with subtleties, and once you will work with subtleties, for you it seems like everything is important, has its own level of importance. But again, I believe with time, with experience, I will learn and hopefully will produce like better results. But again, so far I like it. I like where it's going. It definitely looks completely different from what we had before. So let's launch the first recording, the beginning of recording, and look how CM Punk looked like before at the beginning of the session. So yeah, the difference is kind of obvious. So let me put him in here. So right here, let me turn off the unneeded things in here. I'm probably not going to. Okay, I'll go into the beginning then. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely a difference between those two. I mean, you might not see it, but it's definitely there. So besides the fact that we established anatomy a little bit more, because right here it's kind of a little bit smoothed, we definitely worked on a nose a little bit. We made eyes a little less big. We pulled down the eyebrows, made the ear bigger, made the shoulder look like actual shoulders in terms of the width, better established anatomy. Most of the things are kind of stood the same, but again, it's all about subtleties, and you actually see the difference between this and this. So this still kind of looks like a game character, in-game character, not necessarily perceived as a real one. So it's kind of pretty close to the stylization, maybe. I mean, if I will like look at this character, this one definitely looks a little bit more like a game character. It's like it's just actually created with a computer-generated program. This one looks a little bit more like an actual real human face because it definitely has a little bit more character to it. And this is kind of one of the things that I need to figure out how to achieve once I will start to create my own characters. Like how to add this element of character. Like apparently we need to break down the barriers, like broke down the appeal, because if your character looks too appealing, it doesn't have character. Maybe this is the case, getting back to the appeal and the fact that like each person has their own appeal regardless of they're pretty or not in terms of the regular standards or societal standards, whatever. So because of this, I believe we need to look on people a little bit different. Like each person definitely has this unique element to them that makes this look like an actual character. And if face looks too pretty or super perfect, it's probably going to be looked generic at some point. And this like element of being generic, it's not going to create appeal at all. So yeah, I guess this is kind of getting closer to the summing up the session. Unless I will start to I will find something to talk about. But in most cases, yes. So again, it seems like there was not that much work done throughout the session, because again, we kind of started with the thing, and the only thing that we did is just kind of added a little bit more sharpness to the things. But again, we made lips more established, we made the anatomy parts a little bit more established, that there's an actually clear distinction between each parts of the anatomy, which is, I believe, a good way for you to learn anatomy in terms of the like putting this stamp of this anatomy scheme in your brain, actually understand the scheme of the anatomy that way. And the more we will draw this type of anatomy scheme, the more we will understand like how this anatomy scheme is going to change from person to person. Because for me personally, this is one of the things that I want to learn how to do. Because yes, I established my personal anatomy scheme, and I'm probably not going to be able to show you it because it's super far away, or not. Let me see. I actually will show you it. So I established my my own like scheme, face scheme. So here it is. So yeah, this is my face scheme, which basically started with some type of a simplified primitive that has some planes. This is basically to understand light in a little bit simpler way, how light basically hits the face. Yeah. And then basically established the scheme with the analytical thing. Most of the things are in Russian, so because I kind of established it at the time that I didn't work with English that well, so and it doesn't mean that I'm working with English right now well, so I'm still kind of learning, but still. So either way, again, I'm using this scheme. I'm basically printed the scheme inside my brain, and I'm trying to utilize this scheme and understand what is the difference between this, like the scheme, the implication of the scheme on different people. Because again, right now, this is, by the way, a Colin Farrell scheme. This is Jessica Alba. I know that there probably doesn't look like it. This is one of the things that I talked about, that this is one of the reasons why CM Punk doesn't look like CM Punk yet, because we're still on the stage of the anatomy that didn't necessarily added all features that make CM Punk. The same goes for this. This is the actual scheme for the Jessica Alba, and you probably would never notice it. The same goes for this guy. It's a Colin Farrell's proportions, Colin Farrell face. But again, you probably would never see that this is a Colin Farrell's face. And this is the exact kind of a problem with learning anatomy, that once you will learn this scheme, it's not going to show you the actual face. It will create a base for it, but you still need to work on the actual proportions of the face to make it look like the actual person. But again, by adding asymmetry, I believe, I guess one of the reasons why they don't look like an actual person, because they, again, super symmetrical. Yep, they're actually super symmetrical. And because of this, like one side is reflected to another side. So I basically choose one side of the Jessica Alba's face, and it's kind of mirrored. Because of this, she doesn't look like her. The same goes for Colin Farrell, because their face is actually much more, of course, like less generic, and these look like super generic, although they have all features of the characters that we worked with. The same kind of goes with CM Punk. So for now, it looks kind of generic. So, so yeah, the next session probably we will try to go from this generic look and try to establish less generic look and more realistic look. So it's definitely not going to be an easy job though. I still probably going to make it separately out of the streams, because again, for me personally, working with this throughout the streams is super hard, because I need to talk at the same time, paint, like sculpt something, and although sculpting for me much easier than painting and drawing, it's still not a second nature to me. It's still kind of, I still need a lot of experience, and until I'll get this experience, I believe these sessions are not going to be like live. I mean, in terms of, I'm going to talk live, but I'm not going to create live. Maybe some of them we will like work on something if I will feel like it, I don't know. But in the future, they will definitely go like live. So we are going to sculpt something, and while sculpting something, we're going to talk about WWE, we're going to discuss the process. So they're going to be a little bit more fluent, because right now they're kind of all over the place, and I completely understand that. So yeah, let's just stop wasting time, and yeah, I could talk about things, continue to talk about things, but again, I don't have that much experience in sculpting, although I believe all knowledge that I learned from the painting and drawing anatomy, I definitely using in here, because again, for me, sculpting and painting, there's like the same thing. When you're painting, you're creating an illusion of reality, and right here, this illusion of reality already created by the in-program conditions, but still, both ways you will learn the form. In painting, you'll learn the form by learning how to create an illusion of reality of this form, and right here you will just learning to visualize this form. So working with sculpting a little bit easier, because there's less work there, because you don't need to create an illusion of reality, it's already created for you. You need to work only on visualization, but with painting you need to work on both right away, and it's harder balance. It's just hard to maintain this balance of working with form and at the same time on visualization, at the same time create illusion of reality. In order to do that, you need to study a lot and go through a lot of repetition. And for me, again, repetition, it's not something that I like that much if it doesn't have a efficiency behind this. And this is one of the reasons why I'm choosing this type of method, because for me it seems efficient. I don't have problems with repetition as long as it has efficiency behind this. If it's not efficient repetition, when you're just repeating things in order to learn how they work with this particular angle or whatever, it's waste of time. You will still learn that way, but it's going to be so slow progression that you're going to be tired of learning. So this progression is a little bit more rewarding, because like I liked how I created the skull, rewarding. I kind of liked how I then added to the skull the rest of the things. So when we actually added those things to the skull, I kind of liked how they look too. Then I duplicated the skull, then let's just start to work with anatomy. I was hesitant to start to work with anatomy because I wasn't sure how to do it, but it actually was super comfortable and rewarding. So I actually went through the anatomy and had so much fun and didn't necessarily struggle that much. I mean, it was definitely rewarding. And the reason why it's rewarding, I believe, it's because we're using this high structural dependency concept by going with the stages, with the steps. Because yes, we're learning, but we're not learning by pure repetition, but we're learning with the smart repetition. And smart repetition is the type of repetition that basically holds a structure behind this. So if you will learn how to draw, for instance, the face, you will learn how to draw the face from multiple angles. You will learn the actual form of the face, the actual anatomy of the face, because it will help you to learn how to clearly depict it from each angle. Because if you don't understand like why face looks that way from this angle, for instance, the anatomy will help you to understand why exactly. Because now you know, oh, because this muscle goes that way. So, okay, now I know. So, yeah. Why eyes look the way that they look. because there's orbiculis oris around it, and because of the structure of the muscle itself. And again, it's just much easier to learn anatomy this way. It seems like too much work, but in the end you will be rewarded more than you would be rewarded by just repeating the same thing over and over again and hoping to learn. Knowledgeable and smart learning, it's always better than just aimless learning. We all know that. If you will structure your learning, if you will understand each step of the way and how to control this step of learning, you will learn much more efficiently. And I guess this is the thing that I'm going to leave you with in the stream. I guess throughout today's session, this is the only thing that we talked about. We apparently talked about this type of concept. We talked about the efficiency of learning, and I tried to stress the fact that using high structural engineering dependency seems an efficient way to learn. So again, to simplify this high structural engineering dependency thing is to basically build a structure of the human face from the beginning. Basic primitive, then skull, then muscles, and only then face. Not only muscles, yeah, of course we added the fat here and there. We also will continue to add fat and skin thickness to this sculpt, and it will become a little bit more unified. And the more you will do this, I believe, the more you will, and the faster you will learn anatomy. Because again, this is what I believe it's efficient. Why it's efficient is because we have a connection somehow, like on uncontrolled level, the connection between skull and muscles, the understanding how we are actually starting with skull, how the skull progresses into the muscles. If we're going to use a ghost thing with transparency, we even will be able to see like the underlying structure. So right now we actually see in the skull. Oh, snap. What the poop? What happened? I deleted something. Something was in ears and neck. What's happened? Something happened with subtools. I don't know what happened. Oh, yeah, it's fine. So yeah, so right now we actually see in like see-through. So how cool is that? I mean, when we actually have this understanding of the human anatomy, isn't it rewarding to know like what's under it? It's going to make the study process much more rewarding, I believe. So it all comes down to, like, for me personally, one of the reasons why I don't like this just strict pure repetition learning is because it's not rewarding at all. I mean, it will be rewarding at some point, but before you will get to this reward, you will hate the process itself. For me, I'm all about loving the process, and for me the creating process needs to be, you need to have fun while you're doing it. And if you don't have fun during your creative process, you're probably doing it wrong. I don't know. This type of process will make the most tedious thing super fun. Again, I'm not talking about professional work, because once you will start to deal with professional work, you have to find shortcuts in order to fast pace your process and present work towards deadline. We're not talking about that. We're talking about strictly learning. So if you have time to learn, spend it with basically with purpose, not just with aimless repetitiveness. Because again, I definitely will connect inside my brain this element. It would be even awesome if I would actually use the actual skeleton and understood how vertebrae works, because it actually will help us to understand the rotation of the neck, because this type of rotation is super complex. It kind of goes rotation, it rotates a little bit in the lower part, then it will continues to rotate in the middle part, then it stops to rotate in the middle part and continuous rotation into the high part. So there's basically kind of three areas of the neck that basically like creates this full rotation, and it would be awesome to actually understand this in the future. But again, for now we're working only on anatomy of the face itself, on the head itself. Although we will create a neck for it, we're still not going to focus on the neck that much, because again, it's not the whole anatomy yet. Although maybe like after a couple of sculpts, if I will feel confident enough, maybe we'll actually start to create something like an actual skeleton right here. We actually tried to kind of establish ribs in here a little bit, clavicles, the scapulars a little bit, so why not? So it's actually possible that we might do this next, or not next, but at some point. Again, this is the way for me to learn anatomy, to study it in much more efficient ways. Sculpting is definitely an awesome tool, an awesome instrument to do that, because again, it's much more intuitive. You have more things to work with, you have more control, you don't need to create an illusion of reality, you need to just learn how to visualize, and that's it. And then you could apply, if you actually don't necessarily want to sculpt, you could apply this knowledge into painting eventually, which is the idea. I'm not a sculptor, I'm a painter, and I'm this type of artist. I'm basically 2D artist, not 3D artist, but I still want to utilize 3D to the fullest in order to learn how to be much more efficient in 2D, which most of the artists already figured it out and using it all the way. So some of them are using 3D as a conceptualizing tool, because it's so efficient to to deal with concepts, especially if they have more a lot of experience, because now you're right away working with the 3D form, and you could create like limitless results. The possibilities are limitless. So yeah, we're going to end the stream on that note, I guess. Again, this is the way to I believe to work with this. Again, it all depends what you value the most, and what type of person you are in terms of like how your brain works. You might not deal with this like better, I don't know, but I still believe, like I noticed throughout the years that the most successful painters and artists are the ones who implemented sculpting into their pipeline, or at least they learned sculpting, because again, you're dealing with the actual 3D form. It's definitely going to be much more efficient than just trying to draw things on an actual canvas and creating an illusion of reality with it. You have to understand the shape, like the three-dimensional shape first, in order to fake it on the paper. So this is exactly what we're doing. So I guess I'm just repeating myself throughout the last hour, probably. Sorry for that. I didn't mean to. Sometimes I'm overstressing things in terms of like getting my point across sometimes. So hopefully I'm not going to do that in the future that much. So yeah, again, we definitely went through a lot of changes throughout this. It seems like not, but again, we created a comparison. By comparison, it actually looks more like a person. And again, it still kind of not necessarily looks like steampunk. I believe the next stage is definitely going to be like steampunk. So I believe the next stage is actually going to be like duplicating this muscles thing. So what we're going to do is just basically going to duplicate it. Yeah, we're going to rename it, and we're going to work with the one on top. We're going to put it in a transparency mode, of course, and we will start to smoothen things out, or basically add more and more belts try to make basically this face a little bit more uniform and less look like an actual anatomy. So all these things will become smoother and smoother. Yeah, right now it doesn't look like a face at all, but still, because we still need to keep some parts of the anatomy visible, of course, not to erase everything. But still, this is probably the way that we're going to work with it. But again, hopefully it will be, hopefully the end it will look successful, because again, even if not, I learned a lot from it. So I will take a lot of cool stuff out of it either way, regardless of the results. And then if these results are going to be decent, of course I'm going to post them separately as an artwork. But right now it's kind of just like a test. This is the reason why I chose CM Punk and AJ, because they are not in the company anymore. And although I was their fan, I still continue to basically I still a fan of AJ, I kind of less of a fan of CM Punk for some reason, because of his kind of behavior and whatever, my personal view. But I still love AJ, and I definitely fan of AJ still. So, and because of this, I choose those two. I chose CM Punk and AJ first as a testing ground and some type of a proving ground for me personally. It will show me what I'm capable of in terms of this, like sculpting, in terms of the working with anatomy in 3D and whatever. It will push me to grow, which is the whole idea. And hopefully during the process it will help someone to grow too, because again, maybe you will get inspired, maybe you just will try to do the same thing, try to do the same thing, just like with no hesitation, just try again. It's not that hard as it seems, because again, once you will start to work with the actual sculpts, you will figure it out, your actual visual memory, how good your visual memory is. Because if you're just going to try to draw things, your visual memory is not going to be like showed through your drawings and paintings right away, because first you need to learn the skill of creating illusion of reality. Only then you could actually show your visualization skills. But if you want to test your actual visual memory, what you're capable of in terms of the observing and putting this observation into reality, try sculpting 100%. This is like 100% is going to show you your level of visual memory. If you're going to create decent results, that means like this is a good way to assess your skills. Like actually try to like see what you're capable of, I believe, because if you're going to, I don't know, judge yourself by how you paint or how you draw, because there might be the fact that your drawing and painting skills are lacking, you might find yourself in a weird situation when you are actually capable of more, but because you're choosing the wrong medium to prove yourself that, until you will balance the skills with your vision, you're not going to be able to produce proper results. This will help you to understand your proper results, and without confusion know that the only thing that you need to work on drawing and painting is the actual skills of drawing and painting. So you don't need to focus on the actual visualization, you just need to focus on creating an illusion of reality and knowing how to do it and how to connect these pieces together. So this is the way that I'm looking at it, I believe. So yeah, I guess this is kind of it. So for me personally, this is the exact way I'm looking at it. So I'm looking at it this way. Sculpting for me, it's a proving ground what I'm capable of, like visually, what I actually can visualize from my brain or from the references or whatever. And then it will give me more confidence in drawing and painting, because now I know that I could create this thing by myself, with no tracing, with no nothing, just like looking at things and visualizing. And it will help me to gain this level of experience and confidence in myself to know what are exactly the problems are in the painting and drawing area, and focus on building those gaps and filling them and balancing things together. Yeah, hopefully it was clear. Whatever, so we're going to end on this note. Thank you for watching. Again, thank you for being here. Next week we will continue this. Hopefully next week we're going to have more results. Maybe even till the next week, maybe I will even finish the Sandbox. I said that before, but right now I definitely feel like I'm pretty close to it, because again, we're almost finished with the anatomy stage. The next thing is just putting the facial features together, and that's it. The only problem that I definitely have is how to deal with the hair in here, how to work with the hair. Like, this is going to be a problem, and how to actually present it finally, because I'm still struggling. Like, do I need to sculpt it to the super high details, or do I have to sculpt it with this particular level of details, then put it in a painting program basically and paint over it? That way I'm still produce this result, but I'm just like creating a painted version of the final sculpt. So maybe we'll do that. So I still don't know what like the exact look of this in the end, so I guess we'll see. But again, hopefully it's going to be a pretty decent one. And because of this, I still don't know how to attack a hair. So do we actually have to use a fiber mesh in here to create hair, or are we just going to sculpt them? I don't know. It's probably not going to look good if we're going to sculpt them, but still, who knows. Again, still a lot of things to figure out, still don't know how to approach process. And for the men's hair, it's not going to be the problem, but for the women's hair, it's going to be a problem, because most of the women, they have a pretty long hair, and because of the long hair, it's going to be harder to create them in sculpting. Trust me, I tried, and it's not easy to use the same method of trying to sculpt the actual hair without any type of inbuilt thing like fiber mesh. So because of this, we're probably going to explore fiber mesh, even for the men's heads, because yeah. So yeah, this is kind of it. Again, thank you for watching, thank you for being here. Have a nice day or night, and we're going to see you in the next session next week, where we're going to talk about on Wednesday. We will continue to talk about WWE, whatever will happen on the next week. And that's kind of it for today. Bye. Buddy says bye.